welcome back to the Pathfinders podcast. We are the Pathfinders, and we are charting the way through all the vast nebulous information surrounding Star Citizen and its development. I'm Tree0311, and my partner in crime over here.
I am the overworked, sickly producer, Nazeris. Oh man, it's been okay. So my internet's being stupid, so the show might not be as good as previous weeks. I'm getting tons and tons of little notifications, and yeah, my internet just said it's transmitting 0 kilobits per second. So that's all sorts of fun. The video, because I did start the actual recording this time, the video and podcast or audio version.
I always forget to remind you and be like, oh, hey, remember to record.
Yeah, wow. I've remembered recording this time, so the YouTube versions will be up hopefully very soon after. Not like the same day, but hopefully the Wednesday. The
it does make it a lot easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Also, Tree, are you using a different mic?
This is my big fancy mic.
It sounds like you're talking through a can.
Sounds like I'm talking through a can. Did it change after we got started, or?
It seemed to get a little worse, so I don't know if it was. Let's see what Discord's picking up.
Setting mic.
Did it pick up the right one?
Yeah, it says my Elgato.
Great. Let me see if I have a problem then. I done. I guess we'll just roll with it. Because we are already 13 minutes late getting started, so.
Huh.
It's just somehow like popping out before it actually transmits through Discord, it sounds like.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Wait, transmit through Discord. Doesn't transmit through the VOD or the Video Ninja thing that you use?
No, I have that muted.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, here, let me check Discord then. I was looking at the wrong thing.
Oh, okay.
Input. It said it was the default.
No, that's much better now. That's so much better now.
That's so weird. Yeah, it was.
Blame Windows. Just blame Windows.
Yeah. I don't. If it was using default, it's like, wait a minute, what are you using? The default is this microphone right here. What other microphone are you using? Because I have the headset microphone turned off.
Webcam?
It could be. I wonder if I'll have to see if I can disable that just so it.
Oh, you definitely can.
Yeah.
But no, it's so much better now.
Defaulted to that. Okay, good, sweet.
Yay! More better audio. All right.
I have you up on Twitch on my computer, and it is buffering like crazy. So I don't know if it's my interwebs.
Nope, that's me.
Yours.
That's me.
Dang it.
Yeah, it's gonna be super rough. Basically, the box that lets us transmit out from my house on the pole outside that is owned by Spectrum is basically dead.
Oh.
And they said they were going. Yeah, they said they were gonna tech out in 2 days. That was like Saturday. They said that.
Oh no.
But then we had the weekend, or no, that would have been Friday. Then we had the weekend. Then we had 4th. So.
Well, you sound okay on audio on Discord.
Yep, the video's gonna be fine. So just assume the video's gonna be fine.
All right, we will pretend.
You will pretend
the video is gonna be fine.
Yeah, when I was trying to stream 2 days ago, I was trying to stream Medieval Engineers, and it was like 10 minutes behind on the video. It was bad.
Oh no.
All right, so what do we have for this week, Tree?
Yeah, so I am. It's good to be back. I was talking to Darge, and I thanked him for covering down for me in my absence while I was on vacation. But yeah, it's good to be back and good to be doing our thing. Good to see you. We've
Yeah.
hardly talked over the last 2 weeks,
Yep.
so. Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, not only am I back from family vacation, but we're back to our regularly scheduled content
Woo!
for like the first time in a month. It seems like. What
Just
what's up with
before it
that?
starts getting heated up too, because like we got the three seven. What I'm getting my Minecraft and Star Citizen numbers mixed up. It's
317.2?
317.2. 317.2 should be live this week or next,
Yeah.
and then we have ramping up news for like next month or next uh podcast. We're gonna have both the roadmap and monthly reports to go through.
Yeah. Well, and the monthly reports are always good, but that roadmap, the
Yeah.
roadmap roundup tomorrow, I'm thinking it will probably include the first bits of the downstream teams getting updated, and then the next bits will be in the following one, and those are always really informative. So yeah, that'll be that'll be a juicy episode when we get
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. And then we're supposed to be getting the 318 patch onto testing servers relatively soon.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I remember correctly, I've only read this like 50 times now. Chris said he wanted it to be live late Q3, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
live by late Q3 after 2 to 3 months in PTU, and so I'm assuming that 318 will go to Evo, no sooner than a week after 317.2 goes live, because they
Yeah.
can't have two patches, in PTU.
I mean, I'm sure they have
So
backend for it. I just think
I'm
servers
sure
would be a
they.
bit expensive running 3
Yeah.
versions at once.
Oh yeah, and well, and they only have so much QA resources, so it totally,
That's also very true.
you know,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
once 317.2
yeah.
goes live, the QA people can start doing all the repro stuff alongside the Evo
Yeah.
people, the Evocati
I
people.
think that's one of the teams that I would really like to see hiring furiously is the QA team.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the problem with the QA team having a expansive number is at some point you don't need such a big team. And they've already said they don't want to hire a whole bunch for a push for something and then lay a whole bunch of people off. So they grow their team to the size for a perpetual team, not hire a whole bunch of people and then get rid of them. And they
because they also want to have really experienced people. They want to grow people within the company. It's a quality versus quantity.
Yeah. And they don't want to do
we are the quantity.
Yeah. Yeah, we're the quantity. Yay. And they don't want to do the same thing that CD Projekt Red did, which a lot of games do. CD Projekt Red is just the loudest, newest one. Okay. QA services are actually really good. Just bad ones are really bad. But anyway, CD Projekt Red hired a company that lent them, or the service was they would QA their game for them. And then they would give the information back to CD Projekt Red. They could then take that data and go back and fix the bugs and things they found. The problem was apparently they were really bad. They did it really badly, whether it was the company that did it or CD Projekt Red's fault. Either way, something went wrong in the QA process, and we got Cyberpunk.
I think there's a lawsuit going on.
Yeah.
For it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's allegations that the company straight up lied about what they were doing and who was doing it to CD Projekt Red, and I imagine they are just like there's I read an article recently that there's some sort of leak, or whistleblower, who came out and said, yeah, what was going on is not what you were told, and and so there's a big hullabaloo about it.
I imagine the add-on bits, like add-on services for AAA companies, is kind of the same, like marred and ridiculousness as like military contracts. Like, because there's just so much budget, these companies have no incentive to actually do it cheaply. So you're gonna pay $1,000 for a pencil.
Yeah.
Because where else these
Well,
AAA companies gonna go?
Yeah, and CIG wants their own dedicated internal QA who's going to be with them for a long time.
And who
Just
they
these
could
other
oversee,
companies
specifically.
yeah, they mostly just use services in order to QA things once the time comes, and that way they can keep their ongoing costs down, their overhead lower.
Yeah.
And so it's a budget thing, and CIG is taking a somewhat different approach, and I think we all appreciate it, and could things get done faster with a bigger team? Yes, it could. Would it be done better?
Probably
Maybe, maybe
not.
not. I don't think so.
I think the two games that I've seen come out in the last year that had wild amounts of devs working on them would be the Battle Royale Call of Duty thing, Warzone, and Halo. And those projects are, because of their shift post-launch, because so many people worked on them, people are having to dig back through the code that somebody else wrote or 50 other people wrote to figure out how to fix something or how to add something. So it's just because you have lots of developers and get something done quick doesn't mean it's done well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Star Citizen really shines, is everything's done well when it's actually done. Yeah. And then when CIG does give something out to a third party, most notably, the three most notable ones are Ilphonic, Firesprite, and Turbulent. Turbulent covers the entire website. CIG does not develop their website. The most CIG does is update text and images. So they gave the entire website.
They do the deployment services.
Basically, anything to do with outside game servers is Turbulent's job. And then Firesprite worked with them not very long, but I guess it was like a year or so they worked with them.
Yeah.
And they were given
CIG's fault that they got bought by Sony.
Yeah, not their fault. But they gave them the entire right to, or the entire ownership of the arcade product. So that would have been Arena Commander, Star Marine, and Gears 4. They were working on all of them. And then Ilphonic was their previous Firesprite, but they did bads. And we don't talk about them because there was some miscommunication. It was early days for Star Citizen, and they didn't know how to run in-house and not in-house companies. So now they do. But when CIG does give over a product or get someone to work for them, an external company, they give them the whole product they're going to work on, so that there is no go-between that they have to deal with to get the product. Like a QA has to deal with the product, and then the internal QA has to fix it, or the internal engineers. They give over the entire product so that happens. Large rant at the beginning of our stream.
It's just a lot of interesting stuff going on. And, it's especially since I've been gone. It's like there's so many things where because I've been keeping up with the news via my phone while I was on vacation, and it's like, oh man, I wonder what Naz thinks about this. But so we are back to our regularly scheduled content, which is our Spectrum Pulse, which is where we we keep our fingers on the pulse of the community. Not necessarily Spectrum, but that's just sort of our clever play on words for it. And we just keep an eye out for things that are topics of conversation, things that people might be curious about or confused about, and we try and do a bit of a deep dive on them in order to get as much good information as possible, and then present it to you in a way that's objective, and then give a lot of times our subjective interpretation or what our thoughts are afterwards. So this week's Spectrum Pulse is since we decided to go on this one because the last the roadmap roundups for June included the expansion of the progress tracker into Q1 2023 with the addition of work and the additional work scheduled for downstream teams. And there's been a lot of stuff that was added to the progress tracker, both things that were very public on the roadmap roundup, and then a lot of things that aren't, that if you don't keep track of it in detail like Naz and I do religiously.
Yeah.
We have our own little cult. It's a lot of fun. But if you don't keep track of it religiously, you miss out on those details. And so I'm sure Naz has seen it as well, but there's been a lot of confusion about things getting added, things getting removed. Why are they doing these things? What does this mean? And so we decided to come up with some hints, tips, tricks, resources that we could share with you guys in order to make understanding the progress tracker and the roadmap a little bit easier, so that way you can set your own expectations more appropriately, and just have a better understanding when you go and look at it, because it is a bit intimidating. There's a lot of information.
Yeah, I've seen people specifically say they don't understand how to read the roadmap. So that's kind of where this kind of stems from. Is we want to give you guys the ability to see the information yourself without needing, let's say, us to tell you what's there. That way you can fact check us. We're not just telling you what's up.
And it makes it a lot easier for conversations to be had with less confusion.
Just being able to send somebody the link to the roadmap and say, hey, this is tile, because we can send links for specific deliverables on the roadmap now. So this is the thing we're talking about. We can just send that, or you can talk about that. And being able to actually know what that tile means is important.
This tile and the things on it actually indicate.
Yeah. And the one thing that we still are missing on the roadmap, the what else is needed for that. So.
And then after the spectrum pulse, we'll go into our scanner anomalies, which is where us being the Pathfinders, we're charting a course through the nebulous information, and sometimes we're looking at scans and radars, and things come back a little bit fuzzy, and we decide to focus scans on that to get more information. And that's where Nazeris and I pick things that we're whether it's something we're curious about, confused about, something that we saw and we found interesting, and we do a little bit a similar deep dive on that. And so Naz will have his, which is going to be on dynamic events, and mine is on the March of the Vanduul across, and it'll be a guided tour using the Ark Starmap via Nazeris' screen. Let's launch right into the Spectrum Pulse, and we called it, the working title is Making Progress with the Progress Tracker. And so we just came up with some tips, and we got things on screen or in our notes. And Naz, if something comes up on your head, from your head off the cuff, go ahead and throw it out there too. This is just what we could come up with, in a relatively short period. But the first thing with the progress tracker is the progress tracker shows 4 quarters of development. And I know this is a thing that bothers some people, because they'll say, oh, you said you're going to show us a year of work and you only show us 3/4 of the time. And it's like, well, weasel words. The Q1 gets added. For example, during May and June, work for Q1 2023 was added. So when that was added, it showed work in Q1 2023 as well as Q2 2022. And so it shows 4 quarters. And just because Q1 doesn't get added as soon as you get into Q2 doesn't mean they're not showing a year's worth of work. It's just it goes from the end, the beginning here to the end here in the next year. And so technically it is 4 quarters, but the updates, when they add the latest quarter, the 4th quarter, that usually doesn't come until like the end of the 2nd month in the current quarter at the earliest. Sometimes the 3rd month. So like, for example, with this quarter, Q2 2022, April, May, June, they didn't add in work for Q1 2023 until May, right? Yeah, it wasn't until late May that they added some, and then the rest of the downstream work got added piecemeal towards the end of May and through June with the roadmap updates. And so if people, a lot of times people will see sprints for deliverables, and they see that bar going out to the end of the progress tracker. The current end is Q1 2023, the end of March, and they see that and they're like, oh, that means it'll be done then. No, that does not mean that that's when it's going to be done. That just means that is the end of the progress tracker. That sprint could end then. It probably won't end then. It'll probably continue when they add in the next quarter. But people see that. And then when they add in the next quarter, they're like, oh, great, they added more work. It's delayed. It was never delayed. It wasn't scheduled to be done at that point in the first place.
And I think that's the
Yeah.
first good rule of thumb. If something goes to the end of the scheduled,
That's why we made it number one.
Yeah. If it goes to the end of the scheduled roadmap, it is not the end of the progress on that tile. That tile will most likely get extended. It's just the current scheduled work.
It end within the scope of the progress tracker, you won't know whether that sprint is ending or not. And it's just a sprint. It doesn't, even when that sprint ends, you don't know if that is the culmination of the work or if they have gotten this far and then they need to come back to it later.
Yep.
Yeah. So that is numero uno when it comes to setting expectations. There's a lot of big ticket items that were added in May, June that people got all excited about. And they're like, oh, we're going to see this in Q1 2023. And,
like for example, we've had server meshing hit the end of the roadmap for the entire year. We still don't have it because server meshing is not the server meshing that we're getting, hopefully by the end of this year, early next year. It is the dynamic server meshing is when that will actually conclude on the roadmap. So that will not end for probably the next year to 2 years on the roadmap. Yeah. It'll continue every update to be pushed to the wall of the update.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those big ticket items that are going to be worked on and iterated for a long time will just the main deliverable for it will continue to get added, or the end will just continue as the roadmap continues. Moving on to the next point, there are with the progress tracker, you have the two sides. You've got the teams and the deliverables. And if you look at the team side, you see a whole lot of teams are listed in alphabetical order. But there are two different types of teams within the development, two different types of development teams within CIG. There's upstream and there's downstream. And the downstream teams, they take their cues and develop their schedules based on what the upstream teams are working on. And so the Jake Acapella created who is one of his responsibilities. It is not the only thing that he does at CIG. He will be quick to remind you on that. We love Jake. All hail Jake. But Jake Acapella, who manages the roadmap and progress tracker and all that as part of his duties as a community manager, made also the public roadmap companion source document, which we will link in the show notes. And you can Google it and it comes right up. But that is what will tell you within that document what teams are upstream and what teams are downstream. And so it's important to take that into account and look at what teams are working on what. Actually click on the deliverable and open it up and see what team is working within that deliverable or is working on that item in order to get an idea of the scope of the work that is actually occurring. Because if you just look at the team's view, you only see the work that team is doing on that deliverable. And it's very, if people don't go back and forth and look at, this is, here's the deliverable with all the teams listed, or here's the team working on that deliverable, it can get confusing.
Yeah.
And so people will think, oh, it's getting done at this time because the team that's working on it is done with it at that point. It's like, no, if you look at the deliverable, there's 4 other teams working on it. And their work is scheduled all the way out to here. So we know that it won't be, there's no way it could be finished prior to this point.
For example, a ship will first show up on the concept art, our vehicle concept art team. If you
Oh,
just
man.
look at the vehicle concept art team, yes, their work will be done at X date, but then the vehicle content team needs to be done for it. Still, it's not going to be done when the vehicle content team's done, because, as we'll get to later, the downstream people need to do their work, and their work's scheduled not as far out as the upstreams. And so, at the very end of the project, within the last quarter of the ship that we are theoretically making up, is going to get done for the vehicle content. All the downstream teams need to be added. So sound, VFX, animation, and even within those, you could have like part-time or full-time work on it. There's a lot of little nuances to going between the team's deliverables and those members of the.
Let's see. And yeah, so go back and reference the roadmap companion in order to keep track of what's getting worked on by who, in order to get a better idea of what's going on. Moving on to point number 3, and this goes along with the first two. The upstream teams are the ones that are scheduled up to a year out. So all the teams that are upstream, they can have their work planned up to a year out. They're the ones that take on the whole of a project, the whole of a deliverable that's going to be taking a long time, and they'll be working on it for a long period, all the way out to the end of the progress tracker sometimes, and beyond. Um, and so when the roadmap gets updated to add in the next quarter, you're only seeing the upstream teams getting changed for that fourth quarter that's shown on the progress tracker. You generally, it's not always, but for the most part, you won't see downstream teams getting scheduled that far out. And so that's the other caveat. If you see a sprint ending at the end of the progress tracker, that does not denote the end of that work. But further, if you see an upstream team's work ending, that does not mean that is the end of the work for that deliverable. Like you said, there's upstream and downstream teams, and sometimes, and people get upset about it, but these things are not fixed. Development, the CIG uses agile development, and as much as some people malign it, it's a good process and it works. But frequently, people will see a deliverable get added, and they'll see the upstream team is going to be working on it out to this point, and then they'll come back and check on it in like a quarter or two, and they'll see that point has changed. And so they'll get all upset. Oh, it's delayed. Oh, they can't keep deadlines or anything like that. It's like, no, this is, they scheduled that, and they're like, okay, we think that this work for this team, for this deliverable, will take this long. And then a month into that work, they are able to reevaluate, the scope of the work and be like, you know what, this is going well, but we ran into this and that, and we need to add more people or add more work to it based off of what was initially planned. The roadmap used to show this based off of tasks.
Yeah.
You had numbered tasks, and so people would just lose their minds because it would start off with this many numbered tasks when a deliverable was first added onto the roadmap. And you'd see every time they do an update, you'd see tasks get completed, and a lot of times tasks would get completed, but then more would get added. That's just the way it goes. As you complete a task, that they're building all these tools, they're building all these assets, and so as you're building it, you run into things that you couldn't. There's no way you could anticipate it.
Yeah.
That's just how it works with a new IP.
A good example of almost that exact thing is the item cache.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the item cache, I don't think we had the roadmap when this actually started becoming a thing. But the item cache was
the progress tracker now.
Yeah, okay. It was supposed to be the thing that gave us the ability to turn on server meshing and full persistence. As they developed it and as they worked on it, they figured out that wasn't going to work. So if that was on the roadmap of the progress tracker, we would have seen more and more tasks added, and then it be completely abandoned, and the bar itself that would have been there would have been gone past until months later, possibly even quarters later, after they went back to the drawing board and came back with the new replication layer and entity grid system. And so that we do have things on the roadmap, and it's only very soon in the future will those things actually start getting into game, and they're still adding new tasks because there's new things for this new kind of tech that they're building that will need to be added. So sometimes in game development or software development at large, when you start something, you don't know the entire extent of what you're going to need for it. And then that thing that you're working on may be inferior to what you actually need it to do. And so you have to go back to the drawing board to find out what will work for it. So that's why some things kind of slip around.
And that is project management 101.
Yay!
It's a very, and the more complex the project is, the more likely these things are going to occur, and it's just the way of the world. And sorry, backers, you need to get used to it. You need to understand that this is how it goes. If you've never undertaken a project where during the course of that project things changed, you learn new things, the plan changed, and you had to adjust at some point. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. That is life. That is adulthood. And it is no different in game development. It is probably far worse in software development, just because there's so many unknowns, and especially in a project like SC. But it gets better over time, because the closer you get to finishing something, the closer you get to the end, the clearer the end becomes. And that's why as you get closer to the end of things, a lot of times things will get delayed a little bit here and there, but it's not generally not big huge issues. The only issue is sometimes CIG isn't great about communicating that, but they have gotten better,
and they're a lot better than most.
Yeah, at least they make the attempt. They try.
Yeah,
at least give them credit for trying. It isn't easy. But yeah, that is it for point number 3. Point number 4: downstream teams are only scheduled 1 quarter out at a time.
3 months.
3 months, and so they only get their schedules get updated at the beginning of the new quarter. So we just started the quarter 3. We are now at the beginning of quarter 3, and the first roadmap update will be tomorrow, Wednesday, the 6th of July. And so tomorrow, and likely tomorrow, as well as the following roadmap update on the 20th. Yeah, the 20th it should be, is when we will see the additions, updates, changes to the schedules for the downstream teams. And Jake is usually really good about putting out the important stuff, additions, changes, that sort of thing. The really most notable things. He doesn't put all the details in the roadmap roundup. He puts this was added, this was removed. But he doesn't put, this was elongated, this was shortened, this had these people added to it, that sort of thing. But those downstream teams should start to get updated next week. And so you run into that tomorrow. You run into that same problem. People see things that the downstream teams are working on, and they see the work ending at the end of the current quarter for the downstream team. I'm like, oh, it must be done. It'll be done. It'll be done at the end of June. So we'll see it in 3.17 too. No, that is not the case. You don't just like with the upstream teams, you can't really get any indication of when that scheduled work for that sprint will be completed until you can see the end of it and until you are approaching the end of it.
Yeah, good example of that one is the tile for every single team, including upstream and downstream, is a tile that's called bug fixing and tech debt. Currently, every team that has that tile go to the extent of their known schedule. They are not going to be done with that tile at the point where that bar ends. So the actor tech team is one of those downstream teams. They're only scheduled for bug fixing and tech debt up to tomorrow, basically. There's more bugs and there's more tech that they need to work on. So when we get the update, that bar will get extended.
And these are all things that you can use to manage your hype appropriately. So that way, you see these things ending, and you're like, oh, it'll be done. Wait, no. Tree and Nazeris said that that's the end of when their scheduled work will be for that quarter. So once we get to the end of that quarter and we get the update, then I'll have a better idea of how much work is needed. Like for me, and probably for a lot of people, the something we're all looking forward to is the new star map, and the UI teams are working on the new star map. The UI teams are downstream teams, and so we have, other than what we can see on the progress tracker, we know they're working on it. We know they've been working on it for the star map and what's the other? Is it
Where?
Yeah, it's the what do they call the deliverable? But it's the thing to do with radar.
The FPS radar and scanning.
Yeah, I think it's that one, as well as the Moby-Glass update. I think are all on there right now.
Yep, and AR map marker.
There are like 3 or 4 huge items being worked on by the UI team that Nazeris I, like every time we read the monthly reports, Nazeris and I scroll down the UI and we're like, where are they? How long? How much more time? When CIG? Because they're huge quality of life things that will just it should make things so much better when we're playing the game. But we have no idea how much longer the work is going to take beyond the end of the current quarter. And so, like I'm waiting with bated breath for the update tomorrow to see if we're going to get an update on the UI teams. That's going to be the first thing that I look at tomorrow is, did the UI teams get updated? And if they did, what's the status of their work? Because it's so important. But yeah, that's probably my favorite example when it comes to downstream teams.
It's the Squadron 42 UI team.
Yeah, they combined it and renamed them. But yeah, they've got a bunch of really important deliverables that are really important for Squadron 42. And every backer who plays Star Citizen should be excited, super excited for what they're working on, especially because Jake himself has said that he has seen it and used it internally and is very enthused. So we shall see. But I'll come back to that towards the end when we get to one of our points. But yeah, that's the downstream teams, only scheduled one quarter at a time. And they get their schedules updated and changed at the beginning of the new quarter. So keep that in mind. Moving on to point number 5. Many, if not most, deliverables require work from both upstream and downstream teams. This is really apparent for big ticket items like ships, events, locations, gameplay mechanics. So if you go look at these, all the big things that you see on the actual roadmap, the release view, if you click on any one of those deliverables on the progress tracker, almost all of them you will see multiple teams assigned to them during the course of their development. Those are the big ticket items that they include on the roadmap release view, and those are the ones where if you're not keeping in mind points 1 through 4, when looking at those deliverables, you're gonna be disappointed. But yeah, like Nazeris, you've mentioned ships, and ships are just like the really good example, especially when going back, because you can look at the progress tracker in retrospect, and you can see vehicles that are being worked on right now and what teams are scheduled for those vehicles, and then you can look at vehicles that were completed and released, and when they were released, and when their sprints, how their sprints correlate or corroborate their actual release. And you can see, oh, okay, the vehicle tech team worked on it out to here, the vehicle content team worked on it all the way out to here, but then it was released here, and in between that time is when, shortly before is when all the downstream teams were doing their work.
Yep.
And that way you can look at your favorite vehicle that you're super excited about, and you can see, oh sweet, they've got vehicle concept art just completed their work, which means it's out of, and maybe they'll tell you in the monthly report, and it's out of white box into gray box, and the vehicle content team is working on it for 6 months. So it must be released with this patch at the end of 6 months.
Not so.
No. As you approach the end of that scheduled work, as long as it's within the end of the progress tracker, as you approach that is when you get into that quarter is usually when you will see the downstream teams added, either the quarter before when the content team is supposed to be scheduled to finish it, or that actual quarter itself. Usually there's like overlap. Vehicle content team is scheduled to finish here. As you get closer, this is middle of this quarter, like the Corsair right now, right? Corsair, the content team is due to be finished, I think, in September or August. No, I want to say it's mid-August. And so everybody's like, oh, it'll be ready for 318. It'll be released in 318. It could.
It could.
Or the downstream teams could get added, and the downstream work could go all the way out into November. Is it likely? I don't think so, but those sort of things happen. And that's why you cannot predict a release date based off of a team's completion of their work. You can't really even sort of estimate until you can see the end of all of the teams that are involved in the work for that deliverable. And you usually can't see the end for that until you are actually within the quarter, that you're within that quarter for when CIG has that scheduled work to be finished. Just like I said, the end gets clear the closer you get. And so, we are coming in the beginning of July, and, over the next 2 roadmap updates starting tomorrow, we'll get our downstream teams added. And so we should see downstream work scheduled for the Corsair. And lo and behold, we'll be able to get a good idea of when the Corsair should be finished. But you don't know until you get, literally get to within, 3 months, of yes or no. And so that's the best way to temper your expectations and keep an eye on things, to say, don't make predictions a year out. You can look and you'd be like, oh, well, sweet, they're working on this. And the work is, the upstream team's work is scheduled to go out 6 months or something like that, 7 months, but it's going to be the upstream team's work is scheduled to be done before the end of the 4-quarter progress tracker. That's a good indication. Sweet, you might see your favorite ship or your gameplay mechanic within the next year, because they're already working on it and stuff. But whether it's going to be in this quarter patch or next quarter patch, you won't know or you won't have a good idea until you get to within that quarter. And it is the way it is. And getting upset about it, if the work gets extended as you get closer, is just setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. And that is entirely because you don't understand how to interpret the progress tracker. And it's not meant to be mean or anything. It's like, this is the way the information is portrayed. There are limitations to the way that it is portrayed. Jake does his absolute best. There's a lot of things that Jake wants to have added, but the Turbulent Web team only has so many resources, and they do have plans to add more things. But this is the information that we have, and if you're able to understand the way it's portrayed, you can not set yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah. And also, the progress tracker is not a set in stone. CIG will have this done by this date, as we've said. It is the prediction of each producer in each team of the entire company that is Cloud Imperium Game. So it is already predictions twice removed. So if you try to make a prediction on top of that, you're now prediction squared, and the shaky ground, or prediction cubed, it would be the shaky ground that you stand on trying to make predictions on the roadmap is very, you might as well be standing on aerated sand. It's very open to interpretation, and there's a lot of things between a downstream team or an upstream team needing more work, a downstream team lingering on some work so they couldn't get that other thing for the downstream part, or deprioritization or reprioritization, or even something getting done faster than thought, or something coming up that nobody expected. So making predictions on top of these predictions of predictions is this is what one part of this kind of segment is supposed to be. Hey, this is how to read the information. Another one is this is how to understand how vague the information, and that's not a CIG specific thing. The roadmaps that a lot of games have are pretty solid prediction, is what every roadmap is. A lot of games, there are some pretty famous ones out there that put out roadmaps and then miss every single thing on them. There are some games that don't make roadmaps, and their roadmap ends up becoming a bi-weekly or monthly or quarterly just update on where they are, instead of with I've seen one that was multiplayer as a feature, and they'll just update it with how big percentage they're currently at. It's not a prediction map, it's a reactive map to where the work is. So just know that this map is, or the progress track on the roadmaps that we have for Star Citizen are very much predictions of where they hope to be, not where they know they will be, because they don't know. Nobody knows in software development anything.
Pardon me.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. No, and yeah, it's that's why they have meetings. In order, like you said, the producer has a meeting with the people in their team in order to try and break down. Okay, this is what we need to get done based off of previous experience. How long do we think this is going to take? What needs to get done and how long is it going to take? And then, later on, whether it's weeks or months later, they have another meeting to see, okay, how is this work progressing? And what have we learned? What do we need to change? What else do we need to do? What resources do we need? How do we need to adjust the plan? And every time these meetings occur, they report to Jake. Jake gets fed this information via their internal Jira, and he updates us, on a bi-weekly basis, based off of the schedules that these teams are on. The teams are on different schedules, and the teams being on different schedules actually creates bugs in the progress tracker, which is a
It's
scanner anomaly I did a
hilarious.
while back.
It's just so funny. There are bugs, and it's just so good. That's how amazing this roadmap is. This roadmap is so complex. It has bugs in it.
Mm-hmm.
Not a static image like most companies do.
When did I do that scanner anomaly?
That one was a while ago. I feel like.
Was that episode 1?
No.
I need to check in with Jake to see if they ever got that addressed, and see if there are items that are still falling off and coming back on.
Gosh.
Item number 6, yeah, we did 5. Item number 6, and this ties into 5, but I thought it was worth reiterating.
It was episode 2.
The people. Oh man.
It's your scanner now on episode 2.
But item number 6, and this is the thing that people always get confused, especially newer folks, is if a vehicle is only being worked on by VCA, vehicle concept art, it is not guaranteed to be in production.
Ooh, here's a good demonstration of this one. The Argo flying saucer. The Argo flying saucer, not an official name, was a vehicle that was concepted. It was white box. And after that, they're like, no, completely scrapped.
Yep.
So they can get all the way through.
That occurred.
Yeah. They can get all the way through vehicle concept, and they go, no, we're gonna take this in a completely different direction, send it back to the beginning of the pipeline, and redo it. So very early teams like that, yeah, doesn't mean it's gonna be there.
Yeah. And vehicle concept art is a upstream team. You know, the downstream teams, take their cues off of them, but it's usually a vehicle goes from vehicle concept art to vehicle content, and then within the work of vehicle content is usually the downstream work from vehicle tech, VFX, narrative, audio, and
UI animation.
Yeah, those sorts of things, based off of need. But I can't tell you how many times people got upset because they thought that their ship was going to be released because they saw it on the progress tracker and they didn't even click to open the deliverable to see which team was working on it, or they're like, oh my gosh, it's only going to take 12 weeks to finish that. That's great. And it's like, no, that's just 12 weeks of work from vehicle concept art. That's just the concept artists, the people who draw the 2D images, and the people who make the base white box in-engine rendering for in order to establish metrics.
It's the pretty pictures.
Yeah, it's the pretty pictures in white box is what concept art entails now. And so people get upset about it, and it's like, you have to read the thing. It tells you that it's just vehicle concept art working on it, no one else. Don't get upset. People got upset when on this recently, when the whole D and E and B were removed from the progress tracker, and it's like, oh, they removed from the progress tracker. I'm not getting my ship this year. I literally saw that, and from people making comments, in different places, and it's like, you weren't getting it this year in the first place. That was just a concept artist going back and updating the concept art or working on the white box in order to try and get it more ready, so that way when the vehicle production teams are ready to work on it, that it's ready for them to go.
I imagine that happened with the Odyssey too, because the Odyssey finished up Q4 last year in concept.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's you have to look at what actual teams are working on something, and keep track of that. But that, I put that as 0.6, because a lot of times a vehicle will start with vehicle concept art, and you see, oh, okay, well, it's just vehicle concept. But if you keep track of the deliverable, as the concept work goes on, a lot of times it will continue straight into production. And you'll see the vehicle content teams work get added in, and then the downstream teams get added in. And you can see that if you've been following the progress tracker for the Banu Merchantman, it was in concept art up until just recently. It was in concept art for almost a year.
It's a big moat.
Yeah, and so it just came out of concept art when they were doing the white boxing that Jared showed us on ISC a couple months ago.
Yeah,
that was still concept art, and so it just went into production after leaving white box and going into gray box. But you can see that on the progress tracker right now. You can see, oh, okay, concept art's work overlapped with vehicle content while they were doing the white box into gray box transition, and now it's in full production. But at the time, the 6 months ago, it was still just concept art. It wasn't in production. We didn't know. We were hoping, and they're saying that they wanted it to go into production, but there's no way of knowing because the work wasn't scheduled. Those teams weren't committed. That happened with the Polaris. The Polaris is on the progress tracker. They did the concept rework of the Polaris. They've given us information about that. It is ready to go into production. As soon as the teams are available and it gets prioritized, it is ready to go. White box done, all up to metric and everything. But it didn't go into production, and so no one was scheduled for the work beyond the vehicle concept artists because it concept art and then end, no less.
And as a quick aside on that, there was an idea there, and it keeps leaving my head. No, it jumped out of my head just now.
Mm-hmm. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Interrupt me if you get it. But this ties into point number 7. If you do look at the progress tracker, and you do look at the teams that are working on things, and if you click on the team, a team's scheduled work on the progress tracker, you can see, like a vehicle content team. You click on the vehicle content team that's working on the BMM, and you can go to that. It'll take you to the vehicle content team, and it'll show you their work on the BMM. And if you open it up, you can see how many artists, how many designers, whatever, are working on it. And it's a bit of a misnomer, but this is the only way that the information can be presented, and it is frustrating to Jake because he and I have talked about it, and I get it, and it's just a limitation of the way that the progress tracker is designed. But the number of devs allocated to a sprint is not an accurate representation of the work. All that does is show you what devs of how many and of what type are currently scheduled to work on that sprint at some point during that sprint. So I forget how many are scheduled for the BMM, but there's a whole bunch of designers and artists scheduled to work on the BMM. There's like 12 artists and 9 designers or something like that. I don't remember. It's a lot. It's a big shit. Not all of them are working on it from the start of that sprint to the end of the sprint. They're not all assigned to it all at once, for the whole entirety of that scheduled work.
Yeah, they don't say what kind of artists they are. They could be 2D artists. They could be material artists. They could be specifically hard service or soft service artists. No, tell you.
And the best example of this, because people got upset about this after they did the BMM video recently. I forget which ship content designer, ship designer said it. He's like, there's only 2 artists working on it right now. And granted, that was they pre-record those things, so it was a little bit out of date. But there's only 2 artists working on it right now because they're going through and just gray boxing it. They're basically just building the shell and the ship, so that way they can have artists come and designers come in and add in all the things that make it look the way it does and make it work the way it does.
Yeah,
but they need to build the shell first.
Yeah, and there's also so many hands you can have touching one asset at one time.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to have 14 people working on it when you only need 2 people to do the rough gray box part in order to get the work going. They just they need the skeleton in the frame in order to get more people. You can't just like with building a ship in real life. You don't bring in 3,000 people to work on the ship when you haven't even built the frame of it. If you've ever watched you can watch videos on YouTube in actual shipyards of ships being constructed and how much more comes in. The skeletal frame is now built, and maybe you have the hull, and that's it. Okay, and now 10 times more people and resources come in because they need to fill it out with all the other things to make it actually function. It's the same thing working with making a ship in a video game, on a smaller scale. And so people got upset because they saw, wait a minute, the progress tracker says this. The progress tracker says there's like, a dozen and a half people working on it, but you said there's only 2.
Yeah.
No. I'm sorry that it doesn't tell you exactly how many people are working on it on that exact moment, but the team side for that deliverable, when it shows you how many artists and designers or whoever are working on it, they aren't working on it during that entire sprint. We don't know if 3 people are working on it at this point and 7 people are working on it at this point and 12 at this point. We don't know, and there's no way for us to know. The progress tracker can't do that, and in order to do that, that's more work, and it's just not worth it. But we do know that during that sprint, this many people are going to be working on it at some point in time, from that team of this type.
I did remember my aside. So my aside for the vehicle content team, yay, is there a lot of people get upset because, and I guess that's just the theme of this segment, is a lot of people getting upset. And my recording just crashed. Yay! Give me a moment while
Don't get mad, get glad.
Yeah, seriously. I have to go move something over so we can actually continue the recording. Where are we at here? Did it rearrange all of my files for? Why? Why did you? My library folder is just gone. Oh. Is this? It could be that one.
Hooray, technology.
Yeah. It's like all of my... For some reason, all of my files just seem to have, like, moved themselves in the hierarchy. Jeez. Move over there, the brand. All right, so while that transfers, I'll do my aside. A lot of people got upset
with. Is your aside gonna get recorded or not?
Oh, that's right. I can't. Right. Hi, chat. How's it going? Oh my gosh.
The good thing is, I think this is good information, and when it gets up on YouTube, and especially when you break it into segments,
yeah,
I think it should get you some views.
It does actually play. It's not corrupt. Dang it. Are you kidding? Are you absolutely kidding? The original corrupted? Just the one that moved. Both of them. Both of them are corrupted.
Oh, did we lose everything?
We just lost everything.
Oh no!
And I don't know what the output to the stream's gonna look like. What you wanna do?
I don't know. You're the tech guy. You tell me, man.
Let me see what the last stream looked like on a playback.
If you're streaming,
yeah,
and then you download the recording, does it show like all the times that it was buffering and everything like that, or does it actually?
It looks like it goes fine. It looks like it's fine. Okay, we're just gonna assume that it goes. It looks like it actually plays back fine for some reason. I don't know how. We're just going to assume that everything goes fine. We'll cut this out in post. Okay, so the aside, yes. Okay. Is that so a lot of people got upset that there were all these concept ships going into production all the time, and we only get like 5 ships a year or something. It's more like 10 or more ships here. Anyway, but like we talked about at the beginning of the show, we have CIG hires these people to have them work. So they have a concept art team. And so these concept artists need to continue working, or there's no point actually paying their wages. So it takes much longer to build ships than it does to concept these ships. So we end up getting a lot more concepts per year than actual ships out the door. And that helps for one reason, because they have the ability to say, this ship will help more sooner, we'll get that one out the door. And this one we'll just keep on the back burner. Or smaller ships can fill holes.
Crucible.
And smaller ships can help fill in gaps when artists have like schedules that don't, or what's the lack of overlap called? When they have one artist works till here, but the next project's not till several weeks out, so you can drop a small bit of work right there. Yes, Crucible. Crucible and the Legionnaire and.
Well, and the Crucible is the perfect example of that. The concept artists got reprioritized from the whole D and the whole E, which have no place in the game right now and won't have any place in the game for a while, and they got put on the Crucible because the Crucible is important for Pyro, because Pyro has no infrastructure and we need a repair ship. There you go.
Could have been full.
I think the Vulcan will get added, but because it's smaller, I think it'll get added later. I think the Crucible is getting started now because it's going to take longer.
And also, they don't have the tech for drones.
Yeah. Well, I think the drone tech will get added in later as well.
Well, of course,
about when they add the Vulcan in, and so I think that they're going to do it so that way ship-based repair that is the inverse of hull scraping will come first with the Vulcan, and then right after or shortly after will come more complete and complex repair with the Crucible, kind of like how they're doing, they're releasing hull scraping with the Vulture, but they're also going to be having it for the Reclaimer with Q3 2018 or Q3 and 318. But they've already scheduled the work for the what is it? What's the munching? What's it called?
Ship munching. Yep.
Ship munching.
Yep.
The next step. To me, that's the equivalent. Ship munching is the equivalent of a Crucible. You have lost a wing or a significant structural element of your ship, and the Crucible will not only be able to, patch up your hull with the inverse of hull scraping repair, which the Vulcan can do with its drones, but it will also be able to replace the frame, the structure underneath, which is the inverse of the munching, which should be the inverse of the munching tech. And I think that is why that is getting worked on now, so that way they can reverse engineer that however it works for when the Crucible is ready.
Makes sense.
But I think that towards the end of this year is when they will start the work for the drones and the Vulcan, because they'll have been done with the Vulcan's ability to repair, which is just the patching with the drones. Here's spray on goo, fill the hole. Anyway, tangent.
Yes.
So yeah, tinfoil hat back down on the table. But that is tip number 7. And tip number 8, and the last one, unless Nazeris, you have any other things that came to mind. I haven't had anything come up since we've been talking.
Nope.
Tip number 8 is use multiple sources to help you correlate and corroborate the information from the progress tracker. The first one being the public roadmap companion. I have that thing bookmarked so that way I can find it easily, because I sometimes I can remember, certain teams I can remember whether they're upstream or downstream. Other ones I just forget. And so I'm constantly going back to that. And it's not just that. There's other information within the roadmap companion that is really good. There's a lot of really good explanations. Things that we've talked about over these are extrapolations and further explanation of things talked about in the companion. I have the link in the show notes, so that way if you don't want to Google it, or you just happen to read the show notes, that it's in there. But the roadmap companion is important. Use it, understand it, know it. When in doubt, check the roadmap companion for some sort of confirmation. The second tool, and this is one that I actually didn't know was actually a thing outside of the little updates that I get in some of the Discord servers that I'm in. I didn't know it was an actual website until Nazeris told me. But there's a thing called Shiny Tracker. And it is amazing. I don't know how it works. It is sorcery, wizardry, whatever you want to call it. Computer magic. But somehow it is able to track all the changes from update to update of the progress tracker and and put them out there. And Naz, I don't remember if you have it in your Oh man, pardon me. Indigestion. I don't remember if you have it in your Discord, but whatever that feed is called from Shiny Tracker, but some Discord.
I don't have the Shiny Tracker one. I do have the website tracker.
Okay. Some of the Discords actually have it, and I don't know how to get it, but it is really cool because it will give you a update in Discord of telling you, not in great detail, what the changes are that weren't in the roadmap roundup. So, what work was added? Was the sprint elongated? Was this one shortened? Was this team was work added as far as another team or more people? All that stuff is tracked, and you can track it using Shiny Tracker. And so Nazeris and I use that religiously in order to keep track of the things that we are watching, like hawks, and in order to make sense of things. Because a lot of times, if you don't follow the development, if you don't look at the progress tracker, you're not going to know that the sprint or this deliverable was elongated. It might not, that won't usually get shown in the roadmap roundup. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I thought this was going to be done. Okay, well, you missed. Yes, I can turn up my audio and get a little bit closer. I think this is the gain, and that does that. Yeah. Am I a little louder now, Naz?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Black Intellect is just in chat and told me to turn up my audio. Let me know if that is better, bud. I appreciate it. But yeah, Shiny Tracker will help you keep track of those things. So that way, if you have forgotten all the other hints, tips, tricks we just talked about, you can use Shiny Tracker in order to help keep track of those things and make sense of it. But that link is going to be in the show notes. It is just shinytracker.app, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what my bookmark says.
Yep. That's it.
Shiny Tracker lists and displays detected changes on the RSI progress tracker. HTTPS : / or whatever slash that is. Shiny Tracker, all one word, .app. So yeah, it is a phenomenal tool. It just takes a little bit of using to understand.
Yep.
Naz, do you have anything to add on the Shiny Tracker? You've been
Um,
using it a lot longer than I have.
Not very much longer, but a little bit.
Yeah.
So it actually does two different things. It shows you the current progress, or basically a different view of what the progress tracker shows, more of a list of deliverables, but it also has a delta. The deltas have been what Tree has been most talking about. It will show you all of the changes that happened on the entire progress tracker since the last update. So that was like if a task was added, if devs were moved around, if time was added or subtracted, if the start date was moved either forward or backwards. So those that will all show up in the delta. In the other version, just the progress tracker, it'll just list it and tell you things about it, what tile is, and when it's supposed to start and finish, and how many devs are on it, that sort of thing. So there's two different things on it, and both of them are very useful. I think the delta is a bit more useful, but both very,
I primarily
useful.
use the delta too. Yeah. As an example, I'm looking at the delta right now, and from the last update on the 22nd, it looks like, of 22nd of June. And so the changes listed from between the 22nd of June and the 8th of June, we talked about how people got upset that the work was removed for the Hull B, the Orion, the Genesis Starliner, and that was just concept art. It was just concept artists. And so, like it says, the following teams have been freed up. Vehicle concept art for the Genesis Starliner. One art dev had 42 tasks. The Hull B, one art dev had 24 tasks. The RSI Orion, one art dev had 42 tasks. So we had 3 vehicle concept artists get pulled from those deliverables, and those were removed from the progress tracker. But then you can go down, deliverables updated, Anvil Crucible, vehicle concept art was assigned, adding 92 days of work, one art dev with 14 tasks. And where's the other one? There's another. Oh, and then the 3 unannounced vehicles. We had 3 different unannounced vehicles. Each one had 2 artists from vehicle concept added. The first one with 10, second one with 10, and third one with 9 tasks. And this was actually discussed in the roadmap roundup. The ships like the Genesis Starliner, the Hull B, D and E, and the Orion were all deprioritized because they weren't going to. The gameplay for them, other than the B, wasn't going to be available in game. It wasn't ready, so there's no point in having concept artists work on updating those ships. And so they got prioritized onto ships that would be are needed and are higher priority for the game, namely the Crucible. And then there's 3 new unannounced vehicles that are going into concept art that are apparently more pertinent to the gameplay of the not too distant future. Curious. I wonder what they might be. More tinfoil hat time, but it makes sense. But that way you can track where the development resources are coming and going from.
Yep.
Yeah. And that is the shiny tracker. The last thing within the resources is the monthly reports. And I know a lot of people don't like reading the monthly reports because they are long, but they're chock full of really good information. And if you don't like reading them, guess what? Nazeris and I do, and we will summarize them for you. We literally collate them into a single document and break down the things in detail. And yeah, it might take a little bit longer than actually reading it, but we will help you make sense of it because we are reading the monthly reports while taking into consideration all these things that we just talked about on the progress tracker and the other things that we see. So it's not just reading the monthly reports verbatim, word for word. It's reading them in context with the other stuff that Nazeris and I watch like absolute, just insane hawks.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we'll be doing that next.
Yeah. But the monthly reports will help you, because the progress tracker just shows bars and types of devs assigned to those bars, and you don't know how many are working on what, but the details are in the monthly reports. And if there are important updates to work on a deliverable or a piece of tech or something like that that you're interested in, and you're keeping track of it on the progress tracker, it behooves you to keep an eye out for it on the monthly report. They will tell you what's being worked on in the monthly report, and you can look at it and say, oh, okay, this ship is in pardon me, this ship is in gray box. And you can look to see, okay, this ship is in gray box as of May. And then you can look on the progress tracker and you're like, oh, okay, the vehicle content team is working on it. It's in gray box. It's about a third of the way done on the scheduled work. Cool. They're making really good progress on it. I can't wait to see more. Or the other, like we talked about, coming back to the UI, because Nazeris and I have been watching the UI work, super closely. But they, when we went over the monthly report last month, right? And they talked about how the the new star map is functioning internally. They had the base function in there, and now they're making it look pretty and adding functionality to it. And that was for the monthly report for May. I think it was either May or April. Yeah, I think it was May. And so you can look at the progress tracker and corroborate that with the sprints that are associated with the star map on the UI team. You're like, oh, okay, the base function is there. They've got the base tech in. They're adding more functionality to it and making it pretty and usable and all that. And it's at this point on this sprint or whatever. You can use that along with the things that we've been talking about for the past hour in order to help set your expectations.
There's one more thing I'd like to add to our resource list, and that would be
go for it.
People and content creators. Kind of a self-plug, but not just one, not just us. Like Salty Mike does them, Astropub does them, Super Mac Brothers does them. There's a ton of
Super
good.
Mac Brother does episodes based off of the Shiny Tracker updates.
There's a ton of good creators that are there trying to extrapolate the same information that everyone else is. So watching all these other points of view on it will give you and me a much clearer picture of what is actually in front of us. Not just one person's, well, that thing says that. Well, if you go and somebody else says this thing means something else, and you go to a third one and they agree with one of the two, it's probably the one that has two people on it. But the more information you have, the better that you can extrapolate and actually get firm information on it instead of just one person saying one thing. And that, again, is what we wanted to do with this segment, was give everyone, all of you, the ability to get the information yourself and to have discussions about it without needing it translated from the roadmap to normal human speak.
Yeah, I didn't, learn all this on my own. I didn't do all this on my own. I figured these things out by talking to people in different discords, by asking devs who are active in different parts of the community, and by following different content creators who have learned these things. I'm not some sort of wizard who, I don't have any insider knowledge or anything like that. I've asked and I've learned and I figured this out. And so it helps me. It's not a lot of people get really upset about the pace of development, about things going on. And I don't get upset at all. I don't get upset anymore because I've been following closely and I've learned, and it helps me set my own expectations. And I'm much more, about everything. And it allows for you to have much more interesting and fun and engaging conversations with other people in the community, or the parts of the community that you're involved in. That's how Nazeris and I got started with the podcast, is because we enjoy this stuff and we enjoy talking about it. And you're like, hey, dude, do you want to talk about this live on stream? Yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's do it.
Live
you're,
this week is not exactly live.
yeah. It's alive, barely. We're doing chest
Yeah.
compressions. We're doing CPR on Twitch right now.
Oh.
But yeah, you're exactly right. Like I watch every episode of Super Mac Brother, every episode of Astro Pub and all his different channels now. I watch every episode of Space Tomato, every episode of Info Runners, every episode of Morphologists. You know, I source, along with all the other reading that I do that a lot of people don't like to do, but you can get a lot of this information in really a high quality presentation from these different people. But it's important to take it all into context because not no one is perfect. No content creator is perfect. No content creator has a complete understanding of all the things, and that's why it's important to get information from multiple sources. It's almost like doing research on your own is probably a bad idea unless you know how to do research. But
What?
weird. But yeah, that is I think that's the end of the Spectrum Pulse. I hope that you guys find it helpful. If you have any questions, pop into Nazeris's Discord or the Info Runners or the Astropub, and hit us up. Leave a comment on YouTube, and I promise we will answer it to the best of our abilities, or reply to the best of our abilities. But I hope that this has been illuminating. And yeah, like I said, if you have questions, or you want to chat more, we'll do a live demonstration with you in order to give you a visual of what we're talking about. But this is the production value you're going to get for right now.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we now move on to the scanner anomalies.
Take it away, Nazeris.
All right.
Show me what you got, bud.
So it's actually gonna be pretty short. Most of it is extra reading that you could do, but it's more of a definition on two major pieces of tech that's gonna be coming in over the next year or two, much like most of the things in Star Citizen. But the title is "What are dynamic events, and why aren't they dynamic?" So the whole pitch for a dynamic event, or these events that we have, is that the game can simulate in a way to where eventually it ticks over and this event is spawned. So a Ninetales lockdown would happen when the piracy or the Ninetales activity is at a critical mass to where they get bold enough to lock down an entire station. Or to where the Jumptown event would spawn if there's so many of a certain commodity being bought and sold from a certain outpost. And once that reaches critical mass, it will start up the Jumptown event on whatever resource that is, from whatever outpost that is. Currently, however, because it's still early days for the entire system, these dynamic events end up being scheduled events. So we have currently, I've listed the AIE, so the Aerospace, or IAE, Intergalactic Aerospace Expo, the Invictus Launch Week, Xenothreat, Ninetales Lockdown, Jumptown, and Siege of Orison, which are all dynamic events. Eventually, they will switch over to being actually dynamic, but for now, they are scheduled events that CIG has firsthand. They will go into their editor. They will set up when these things happen, and what are all the triggers and how many things spawn in for when they're the PvE event. So they'll dial in how many commodity that Jumptown has, or how many pirates will be interested, how many Xenothreat you go up against, or how much the shouts will modify by when there's a lockdown. In the eventuality, when the system is more complete, there will be dynamic quanta or quantum triggers. That's the backend system that simulates the entire universe, and that is what's going to end up dictating what these events actually do. The reason it is necessary that these events become dynamic is that eventually they will stop being broadcast on the website and on Twitter. Because with systems that we have on the map, so we have about 100 systems on the map, there is a feasibility that there could be a dynamic event for each system. And these will be going off whenever they dynamically activate. So CIG themselves will not be able to keep track of all of the different events that are spawning at different times. Obviously, they'll have the data that they can look at, but they won't know in advance when all these things are going to kick off. So whether there's a Vanduul attack on the Vanduul front, or there's a Suli moving in to sell their wares, or the Jump Town events are spurred on, whether there's a crime spree, Xeno threat has popped out of Pyro again. All these different events will just be done because the game is simulating the economy at the back end and different movements in the political geography. So eventually, and I think the technology to watch on the roadmap, so nice tie-in for the last one, is the virtual AI service, which is it's a bit lower down on how it affects the dynamic events, but it is one that does have good merit because it is the go-between between a NPC you see and the quantum simulation. So it's not too terribly tied to the dynamic event, but it is one to watch. The dynamic mission system, so this one Tony Zerovic actually did specifically mention in his talk about dynamic events, and the information that is in this bit that I have is all linked up in the show notes, and just hitting my mic, it's fine. Mostly coming from Star System, Quantum, Quasar, and Virtual AI. And I actually have one of the videos timestamp, or that one timestamp, so you guys can go straight to what is a dynamic event as far as their tools are concerned. But dynamic missions is going to be, instead of, again, authoring every single little thing about a mission, it's going to be pieces of missions with dynamic, let's call it metadata inside of it. So some NPCs need some box moved to somewhere from somewhere, instead of this person needs that box moved from there to there, which is what we have now. The dynamic mission system will be able to do all of these not known things in the future. The next one being the quantum simulation, the entire back end of the simulation of Star Citizen itself. This is how the game will actually go into the not known from the dev's perspective. They'll set up how things are procedurally moved around and simulated, but they won't dictate this NPC is moving this many goods from here to here. That place will just have a dynamic need from whatever reason it has needs and exports, and some NPCs will start moving. And that will get more and more complex as time goes on. The next tile to look at is, funnily enough, dynamic events. And this is the core work on how to get these events all built up. So we're around halfway through now that we have these scripted events where CIG themselves put in every single detail, activate it on their whim. But eventually, when this tile gets more and more done, we will have these dynamic events, and as I said, they'll be able to just say, these are the criteria that make it spawn, and then just leave it alone until the game ends up fulfilling those activation rules. And then the game will be able to fill in the details of the event. And I had actually an extra chat, but those are the tiles that have at least a little to do with the dynamic event system. So what is the eventuality, or how long we're going to wait? Well, that is actually the one thing we don't know. The dynamic event system is currently scheduled all the way until the end of March. However, as we talked about in the last segment, it's scheduled to all the way to the end of the schedule, so we actually don't know. And then
what? No.
So the mission feature team is the one that runs all the way to March of next year. However, the systemic systems and tools team gets their work done in November, and the USPU gameplay feature team gets their work done also in November. So there's a chance that we may get a dynamic version sometime before the end of the year, but I would imagine that would be in 4.0. So I imagine whatever this would be, whatever dynamic system, it would be a 4.0 system, just based on the timing that I see on the roadmap, which means we're probably not going to get it till next anyway. So imagine somewhere near Q1, Q2 next year. But that will be when we actually have dynamic events, and that will not only have it more of a unknown, even though I'm sure a lot of people will not like being able to miss the events. They are at their core world events that just happen. But we will almost definitely get a ping in game when something like this goes off, and we will also my thought kind of rolled away. But anyway, it'll be more dynamic, and we'll be able to actually see the game actually following the rules that they set up, which will mean we can then influence when they show up. So that will be much interesting. So that is all I got on
the
dynamic.
part that I think is the most interesting is these events are going to be triggered dynamically. We won't know what the criteria to trigger them are. And, as players, being a small portion of the universe, we can only do so much to influence those criteria. And we can only do so much to track them, in order to prepare, and some of them won't even be triggered. They will just, by, in-game criteria, the devs can literally just flip a switch.
Yep.
And it'll go on.
Yep.
If they want, maybe the Vanduul will rate a system if there's a certain amount of traffic or something like that, or the traffic to security or UE Navy population ratio, tips too far in the not enough security for the not enough population. Maybe that it'll be dynamic like that, or they might just trigger it and let it happen and not tell us, and all of a sudden you'll get an alert on your mobiGlas or something like that, or on your HUD, one of your HUD screens, in your ship, saying that the Vanduul are attacking. You might be in a system far, far away from where the event is happening, and then you'll read about it in the little news clips, that come across Spectrum in game. The Vanduul attacked, the Oberon system again on this date, and you're like, wait a minute, that was 3 days ago. And so you might hear, you might, if you're not paying attention, in game or something like that, or out of game, you might not hear about the event happening. And these things are going to happen, and you're not going to be in the right place at the right time. Players will try to be in the right place at the right time, but you won't ever, the likelihood of you being in the right place at the right time every time, or even a large percentage of the time, is going to be low. And so sometimes I'm sure we'll see players trying to trigger them. And we'll see players racing across star systems in order to participate in the event, because these things won't just be oh, it's done, and 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, it's over. A lot of these things will be ongoing for good periods. But I think it's just absolutely fascinating that the things can trigger without players even being involved at all. It can just be because of NPCs doing NPC things, and the stars aligning with probability volumes in order that will trigger events. And it doesn't have to always be combat. There will be events related to every mechanic that CIG is developing.
Yeah, like specifically the Vanduul one. If the Vanduul attack, and then the people who want to do the fighting of the Vanduul go in, there's going to be a mission afterwards to go and get the resources to that place for the recovery of that place. So that engages all the haulers. And if there's a war going on, you're going to need repair. You're going to need medical people. But then there's also dynamic race events. The Murray Cup will be a thing.
What triggers will it be for scientific events? New
discoveries.
Yeah, new discoveries or something like that. A comet is passing through this system. And there's all sorts of things that they can do with it, and tie these things that they've been working on with the various teams together into an event, and then decide whether they want triggers or not, or whether they just want it to, devs in the background playing God, and it's just a really cool system that is far and above different and better than MMOs have done before.
Yeah. And the only reason they're not dynamic now is just because the quantum simulation's not done yet.
Mm-hmm.
All the tools there are ready for it. They're just waiting on the implementation of the quantum.
Yeah, they've been building tools and building events so we can test them. So that way, once the quantum simulation and a few other things can get tied in, that way, we're testing it in a small way, just like why didn't they put a bunch of reclaimer derelicts or a bunch of rivers? Well, they add one, and we test it, we find the bugs, and then make sure things are working appropriately, and then they add things to scale.
Yep. I mean, with the river specifically, was wow, that's production ready. Just put it in.
Yeah,
they weren't even testing for that.
Yeah, and once it doesn't take them long to make a river, they can make a river, just by clicking a few buttons, and it literally pathfinds its way across the planet. It doesn't take them a long time to create an event, because all the ingredients are there. That you just have gameplay designers who are, we can, make events and everything. We just don't have the system to dynamically trigger them all.
Yeah,
and the game servers can't handle it yet.
Yeah,
but the more and more of the stars or planets are starting to align in order for these things to happen. If people are like, "Oh, sweet, server meshing is coming in," but it's not going to change player counts. Well, we'll change player counts, slowly but surely. But there are other more important things that this takes into context, and it's all of the services like Quantum, like the event service, moving off of the game servers and onto back-end systems, so that way they can function the way that they're ultimately designing them, like the dynamic event system.
Yep.
It is not a pie in the sky dream now. The work is well underway, and we are watching it with bated breath. But it's the fact that we are already playing the events and they're already talking about introducing more events.
I think we have. Do we have one or two unannounced ones yet for the year?
I'd have to go back to the progress tracker, but I know that they're.
They said something about that.
That's the other thing, is they do show on the progress tracker unannounced content and unannounced events. I think it is.
Somebody should really make a bit on how to read the roadmap.
Weird. And I'm hoping that Jake will soon reveal what item on the progress tracker is the Siege of Orison.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because, that is a thing that is unannounced on the progress tracker right now. And so.
I think I know which one it's going to be, though.
I bet you we could pick it out. I bet you with everything that we just talked about, you and I could probably nail it.
I think it's the one that was done a year or two ago and has basically every single team working on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the one it is.
I know there's like two, but the one you're talking about is larger scale than the other. But it would be the one that has more location work.
Yeah, the one I'm thinking of, it has location, vehicle, facial animation. It's got almost every single team working on it, and that would make sense if you're doing an air-to-ground FPS battle.
Yeah. Before we launch into my scanner anomaly, we're going to take a quick bio break. I'm going to put myself on mute. Give me 2 seconds so I can use the restroom that is 10 feet away.
All right. So here on the stream, we'll actually go through couple of housekeeping things. The stream is running terribly behind. Black, thank you so much for following. I've noticed that you're responding to things that we've done 10 or 2 minutes ago. Sorry about that. My internet here should be fixed by next week. So hopefully we'll get a much better version of that, and also clear up my drive, record properly, and not get a corrupted video in the middle of a stream. We also had Tree gift a sub to Andy1054. Thank you so much. I'll on that back by the end. Yeah. Any questions while we're Should we get back? Well, I guess can't really ask questions because it's But it's fine. Fine. Yeah, I'm looking at the stream now, and it's quite far behind. Yeah, it's quite far behind. Yeah, we're running at currently okay kilobits currently, but it goes up and down.
Alrighty, I am back. Thank you
Welcome
for your
back.
patience. Can you do your thing and pull up the window with the star map on our thing?
Thing.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yep,
I'm
I know
totally
what
making
you're
sense.
Don't worry, I got it.
The thing with the thing.
Yep, thing is up.
Okay. So if you have watched or listened to the stream or the podcast or the YouTube, you know that I am a big fan of the lore. I love the lore. I enjoy reading it. I am certainly not on the level of people like Algrid from Info Runners, Paul Shelley of Astropub fame, Jail, just because as much as I love reading it, I'm not formally trained and educated in order to understand all the context that goes into a lot of this stuff and the symbolism. But I do find it fascinating just because I'm an avid reader. And I have found that a lot of people, when you are talking about the Vanduul, a lot of people aren't familiar with the history of the Vanduul, the Vanduul War or the conflict with the Vanduul, and a lot of people are under the impression that the Vanduul are marching towards Stanton, or the Vanduul are on the warpath towards Earth. They want to conquer Earth, that sort of thing. And so I wanted to use the star map to sort of do a short guided tour of the March of the Vanduul across UEE space since first contact, and also to explain how the Vanduul operate a little bit, and make a few predictions about where we might encounter them in the PU, based off of the lore and based off of what we know. So do me a favor, Naz, if you will turn on the jump points. And let's see, it's and if you will pan, actually you're good where you are. If you will maybe pan over a little bit to the left so that way we're more centered over Orion. So first contact with the Vanduul occurred on August 9th, 2681. And again, in game time right now, it is 2952, so several centuries later. We've been in conflict with the Vanduul for, let's see, 271 years now since first contact. With Operation the Operation Farstar, humanity in the UEE is expanding rapidly across space as we're discovering more jump points and more systems. And it's sort of the way you're looking at the map on the screen, and the sort of default way, but the farthest west, my speech impediment, the farthest west we had gotten really was the Orion system. It was a settled system. You have cities and colonies on the planet of Armitage in the Orion system. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But the Vanduul at this point were unknown to us, and this is more than it's like a century and a half after the am I getting that right? My timeline right? It's a good long while after we beat the Devarin, and we're in the midst of the Cold War with the Xi'an. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these unknown aggressors, the Vanduul, launch a raid on Dell Township on Armitage in the Orion system, and they slaughter everyone and capture one human. And it was really confusing because people were analyzing it afterwards, and the Vanduul took all these weird things. They didn't take things that we consider valuable. They took things that, looking back on it, a lot of people assumed that they were taking trophies and cultural things in order to understand us, sort of understand their prey better, because Vanduul are hunters. They are conquerors. They are out for resources. But yeah, and so shortly thereafter, Vanduul raids also started occurring in Caliban, which is a neighboring system. You can see on the star map where it's connected by a jump point, a large jump point. Large jump points are important. Keep that in mind when thinking about Vanduul history and the progression of the Vanduul war against the UEE and humanity. So after decades of worsening raids, a powerful Vanduul clan launched a massive attack centered around a kingship in Orion. And the system fell to the Vanduul in 2712, with the military having to retreat to Tiber. And it was not an organized retreat. It did not go well. And a lot of civilians were left on Armitage. And there's still, to this day, 240 years later, there are human holdouts hiding within the ruins of the cities on Armitage. It's actually, if you go to the comm link about the Orion system, you can see the concept art for the ruined cities, and it talks about how if you do go there, there's actually a bar. Like it's a small landing zone and everything. People that have just been evading the Vanduul, and the Vanduul, got the resources they wanted, and then they left. They just leave. They don't settle systems, and so once they, scrape a planet largely clean of what they need, whatever's left is left, and they just sort of leave it. So there's humans still eking out an existence on Armitage in Orion. And so this began what is a pattern of behavior for the Vanduul that they pretty much have stuck to throughout the conflict, the war with them. And so after conquering Orion and forcing the UE military to retreat and abandon a lot of civilians on Armitage, the Vanduul bide their time, and they conduct raids, continue to conduct raids in the Caliban system, as well as conduct probing attacks against the UE military in the Tiber system, which, after falling back from Orion, the UAE military is building up their defenses in the Orion system, putting a whole lot of Navy resources there because they're expecting another attack, especially as these attacks continue to escalate. And so the conflict in Tiber began really in earnest in 2732, 20 years after Orion fell. And so that's when the historians really say that the siege of Tiber began. And despite the best efforts of the UE military and the UE Navy especially, Tiber eventually fell in 2736 when a kingship arrived in system from the Orion jump point. And estimates by historians are that losses were in the millions during the siege of Tiber on both sides. We really gave as good as we got until that kingship arrived. And once that kingship arrived, it broke the UE line of defense and forced the UE military to retreat. Because Tiber wasn't really settled or colonized, there wasn't much of an evacuation as far as civilians. But the military hastily retreated from Tiber into the next system, Virgil. And if you just want to show Tiber, you can see where it's linked to Orion on the star map. Actually, I'm going to put it up on my screen. So you can see where Tiber is linked to Orion on the star map by a large jump point. And then you can see it's also connected to Virgil by a large jump point. You can also see that Orion is connected to Caliban, but it is only connected by that looks like a small jump point from. Is it medium?
Yep. Orange or medium.
Yeah, it's a medium jump point from Orion to Caliban, and I think it's a medium from Viking to Caliban as well. So we'll come back to that in a second. But so the UE military is it rapidly retreats from Tiber after the kingship arrives and breaks their line of defense. But instead of biding their time like they had done previously after conquering Orion, the Vanduul pursue the UE military into Virgil in short order. And Virgil was a colonized system, a UE system. There's millions of people living in Virgil at the time. And so after, but because so much of the efforts at stopping the Vanduul were focused on Tiber, once the defenses fell, there wasn't as much, as far as fixed defenses and infrastructure in Virgil for the UE military to fall back on. So they fell back in disarray. They couldn't establish a line of defense, and in pour the Vanduul through that large jump point again with the kingship at the lead. And again, it does not go well. The UE military is not prepared. And so the Virgil quickly fell less than, within a month of Tiber falling. But this time, unlike with the fall of Orion, the military was able to cover the retreat of large numbers of civilian refugees. So even though the system fell quickly, they were able to organize a retreat and get a lot of people out of the system. But this reestablished that sort of pattern of behavior with the Vanduul. So after taking Tiber and then Virgil in short order, they sat on their heels, kind of, and just conducted raids and probing attacks into neighboring human systems. And you can see that Virgil is connected by a large jump point to Vega and Oberon. Vega was a established human system. It wasn't a full-on UEE system. They didn't have Senate representation, but there's a large U.S. human population there. The 2 planets had been terraformed and colonized. Oberon was not. I think one of the planets had a terraforming failure, but there's still infrastructure there. There's resources there. There's humans living there. But so now the Vanduul, they've conquered Orion. They've conquered Tiber. They've conquered Virgil. They're conducting probing attacks into Caliban, Oberon, and Vega. And this is in the mid 2700s. So they're biding their time. They're conducting these probing attacks. And as the years go on, it becomes more and more clear that the scale of the probing attacks in Caliban are showing significant Vanduul interest in the system. And the commander for the system, the commander of the defenses, is begging UE High Command for more resources, more reinforcements, in order to upgrade their early warning systems, in order to upgrade their defenses, because she thinks that an attack, I think it was a she, thinks that an attack is imminent. And eventually, despite all the requests, High Command is like, no, we are more worried about the Xi'an. We can't dedicate resources to Caliban right now, that sort of thing. And so the UE military is really not in a good position when the attack finally does come. And it's interesting that the Vanduul started in Orion, and then they attacked Tiber, and Tiber quickly fell, and then they attacked Virgil. And then they come back, and now they're focusing their efforts on Caliban. And, it's on a different line. And it's also, as far as we know, only connected by medium jump points to not only human systems, but the human system of Oberon, as well as the small jump point to Null, but it's also connected by medium jump points to Viking and Orion. So I think that is the main reason why the UE military didn't really consider it a threat, is because we only knew of medium jump points coming in from Vanduul systems into Caliban. I think it gave the UE military high command a false sense of security that they can't bring in their larger forces into Caliban against us because there isn't a large jump point. And yet, when the attack did come, it was led by a kingship again. And after only 2 days and heavy losses, the UE military was forced to retreat. And again, luckily, most of the system's inhabitants were able to be evacuated, but this is a really high cost. There's actually a really good lore piece that talks about the, I forget which squadron it was, where basically all but one of their pilots was killed. I think it was while defending the evacuees and getting them out of the line of fire as they're retreating from the Caliban system, from the Caliban system. The Fall of Caliban, there's a big lore piece on it. It's good reading. You should check it out. But so they're able to get most of the civilians out. Reinforcements from the UE military, the UE Navy, arrived after the initial retreat by a few days, and they tried to retake the system. They tried to force the Vanduul out. But after heavy casualties, within a month, the system was officially abandoned, and all UE military forces were pulled out by July 23rd, 2884. That's considered the official date of the fall of Caliban. But you can see there's a big time span in between when the siege of Tiber ended at the end of 2736. Virgil falling in the beginning of 2737, and then Caliban falling in 2884. It's almost 150 years, like 148 years or whatever. And so the Vanduul had been biding their time for quite a while before undertaking the attack of Caliban. And this is just theory crafting, but I really think that the timing of the attack was based off of the Vanduul finding a large jump point from one of their systems, from another system into Caliban. Because otherwise, there's no way a kingship came through a medium jump point into Caliban. And it is in the lore. And so unless they're going to retcon something to say that it wasn't a kingship, and they've actually done retcons on a few things to say that, yes, it was a kingship that led this attack. I really do think that Caliban is linked by a large jump point that we don't know about to maybe the Vendetta system, or another system that we don't even know about. And I think that's why Caliban fell, is because the UE military thought that we knew about all the jump points coming into the system. We don't know where that kingship came from. We just know that it showed up. So moving on, following the fall of Caliban, intermittent raids continued in Vega. The Vanduul have secured their flank in Caliban, and so now they seem to be refocusing their interests on Vega, which again connected by a large jump point from the Virgil system, which the Vanduul control. And we've got mentions in the lore that raids continued into the early 2900s, increasing in the 2920s and 30s. And the big signal, which High Command actually dismissed, was when a incursion by a Vanduul raiding party occurred in the neighboring system of Oberon on June 11th, 2945. And a distress call came out from a refueling station, much like the R&R stations that we know of in game, saying that they are under attack. And then everything went dark. And when the UA went out to investigate, they found that everything had been destroyed. Everybody was killed. But the Naval High Command dismissed it as a solitary raid, and they're like, "Oh, this is not a precursor to a large-scale Vanduul invasion. This is just another one of their probing attacks, probing raids." Except for not 4 months later, on October 5th, 2945, the Vanduul attack Vega in force, and they hit most, as far as I'm aware from the lore, the attack was really focused on Aramis, which is a heavily populated um, human colony. Hadn't been granted, the Vega at this time was not an official UE system. The two really heavily populated planets in the system hadn't been granted senatorial representation yet. That came after the attack. But again, this attack, a large attack, was again led by a kingship. And so you can see each time the Vanduul attack a system in force in order to take that system, in order to take those resources and claim it for their own, it's an attack led by a kingship. Otherwise, we do not see a kingship ever, unless the kingship is coming to attack and really take the system. The kingship is the what their invasion forces are centered around. So that's why everybody panics when you see a kingship, because well, great, we're about to lose. But for the first time in UE military history, we were able to destroy the kingship. Admiral Bishop with the UE Navy Second Fleet, centered around a Bengal carrier with a bunch of destroyers and other capital ships, is able to turn the tide. They were able to destroy the kingship around Aramis in Vega, in the Vega system, and they drove the Vandal forces from Vega. And so this is a huge turn. A lot of casualties, high casualties, particularly in New Corvo, which is like the capital city on Aramis. And that's what you see in the Squadron 42 trailer, with Admiral Bishop walking through the ruins, and all those fires and smoke. But we were able to push them back. For the first time, we defeated Kingship, we defeated their invasion force, and we stopped them at Vega. And that's when the Admiral Bishop's Senate speech came out. The Vega was granted senatorial representation. It was made a full UE system. And this is in 2945, and it's now 2952. Shortly after, though, the UE military intelligence got word that the Vanduul were preparing for to mount an actual attack in the Oberon system, not just a raid like that had foreshadowed the attack on Vega. And because Admiral Bishop was already in Vega, he's very concerned about this, because Oberon has a large jump point between going to Vega. And along with the large jump point coming from Virgil, it means that it would make defending Vega very difficult, because you'd have to be covering two lines of approach with large jump points that a kingship could come through. It would mean spreading their defenses thin in Vega in order to protect the system. And so obviously Admiral Bishop did not want Oberon to fall to the Vanduul, even though it wasn't a heavily populated system. It wasn't a ton of value there. It was strategically important. And this is actually the second time that Oberon became very strategically important in its history. The first was during the Second Tavaran War. And so Admiral Bishop detached a strike team. They went into Vanduul, or they went into Oberon, and when the Vanduul forces appeared, the strike team were able to intercept and engage them before they could really attack another human settlement. I forget on what planet it is in Oberon. And so while the UE Navy is conducting this spoiling attack in Oberon, they've called for reinforcements and saying we're engaged with the Vanduul, and they're not trying to push them out yet. They're just trying to, keep them busy. And while they're keeping them busy, Admiral Bishop jumps into Oberon with the fleet, including the Retribution, the ultra super capital ship that we've only seen concept art and white box art for, and orders the Retribution into Oberon in order to cut off any escape for the Vanduul. and they were able to decimate the Vanduul attackers. And so it's a huge victory. It wasn't a full size clan, there wasn't a kingship involved in the attack, but it was a significant force. And the reports say that multiple Vanduul capital ships were there and were destroyed. So along with, even though it was a Pyrrhic victory in Vega, defending Vega, we got a big victory against the Vanduul, where we were able to bring the retribution and the fleet to bear against a more medium-sized clan, and just essentially wipe them out almost entirely. And now we have, the retribution moved on, but now we have a large contingent of Navy capital ships in Oberon. There's static defenses there, keeping an eye on things, making sure that we can hold Oberon and protect the flank of Vega, so that way a very important UE system doesn't come under attack. And so that is. There's one last thing, which is going to tie into, let's see, where is it? Where is it? And there's one last thing that was a little tidbit, but it's important. And I think it ties into this, and it's really flown under everyone's radar. So we halted the Vanduul at Vega. We stood our ground. We were able to destroy a kingship for the first time. That's got to be a big blow to the Vanduul. And then shortly after, we were able to wipe out a medium-sized clan in Oberon, and really show them, hey, we're serious here. You will, you shall not pass, that sort of thing. But in the advocacy, there's a lower Spectrum Dispatch comlink called Advocacy Archive Case File EA number. And it mentions how a small Vanduul raiding party, originating from the Vanguard system, which is way away from everything else that we've been really encountering with significant Vanduul raids and the losing systems of the Vanduul. But sensors in the Lear system, which isn't even a UE system, detected a small Vanduul raiding party coming from the Vanguard system and the Vanguard jump point. And so I think, and this was in 2946, a year after the battle for Vega and Operation Mandrake and the battle for Oberon. And so now I think the Vanduul, after having met stiff resistance in Vega and Oberon, are probing for another front. They are predators. They don't want prey that's going to fight back. They don't want hard targets. As much as they love combat, they also need resources. They need food. They need material for their war machine. And so I think that lore bit is a foreshadowing of now the Vanduul are opening up another front and are looking at different ways to get into more vulnerable systems that aren't on what the humanity traditionally thinks of the Vanduul front. Because we only know of other Vanduul systems that we've never been to, from captured records from what was called the X-12. Which most of us seem to believe it was a Vanduul driller that was found derelict in the Garen system, and but we don't know how it got in the Garen system. And a driller is about the size of a Bengal. It's huge, and so we don't know how it got in the Garen system. Maybe they'll retcon that, but without going from, say, Vanguard to Elysium to Idris, and Idris to Garen, we don't know how X-12 got there. But it's pretty far from Vanduul space. So there could be other jump points that we don't know about that the Vanduul do. And so when you were talking about dynamic events, Nazeris, I was like, ooh, that's a good segue. into what I'm going to be talking about, the Vanduul, because we know that the Vanduul are all about resources. They're very combat oriented, but they also are resource oriented. They have to eat to survive just like everyone else. And the Vanduul line of advance is centered really around probing attacks for years and years in order to test our defenses, and figure out how we work, and figure out how to fight us. And then they bring in the big guns. It's all while they build a kingship and get it ready for invasion. Going from Oberon or Orion to Tiber to Virgil, and then into Caliban via what should be a unknown jump point to us, and then into Vega with a kingship again. And now we know of raiding Vanduul raids into Lear from Vanguard. Vanguard is connected by a large jump point to Elysium. It's also and after Elysium is Centauri and Idris. Elysium is the former home system for the Tavaran. We know that the Vanduul have gotten as far as Garen, because that's where we found the derelict Vanduul capital ship that we got so much of our information about the Vanduul from, because the Vanduul typically blow up their ships if they're going to be disabled. They will commit suicide. And that leads me into my last bit. A lot of people think that because the Vanduul have pushed towards Vega and have taken Caliban, that they're going for Sol, that they're going for Earth. Well, we have pretty well explored Earth. It is unlikely that there are jump points out of Sol that we don't know about. And right now, there's only 2 large jump points, and they go to Croshaw and Davian. The large jump point into Croshaw has a large jump point leaving it into Farron and Retor. Retor is where all the universities are at, but it's connected to the Null system by a medium jump point. And we've known about the Null. We've been in the Null system for a long time. It's a pirate-controlled system, very lawless. But it's connected to Caliban, but it is connected by a small jump point. And so I think that the Vanduul advance from Caliban has not continued into Null or any of the other systems, because they haven't found any jump points that we don't know about in Caliban. And so they can't send a large a large force into Null. And not only can they not send a large force into Null, but Null is 120 AU across. 120. So they can't go from Caliban through Null to Croshaw to Sol. It would be a logistical nightmare, and B, they can't bring any of their big ships. They can't bring a kingship in there. They probably can't bring in even a driller. Probably restricted to very small ships. So that line of advance, they can't lead. They own Caliban, but they can't get into Null or neighboring systems. At least not yet. Maybe there's other jump points that we don't know about. That could be the source of a dynamic event. But the sort of northwestern portion of the UEE is fairly well secure with the forces that we have in Vega and Oberon, because they can't really come through Kellogg, because there isn't any large jump points to Vanduul systems that we know of there, and we haven't heard of large probing attacks there. And so unless there's a bunch of unknown jump points, we're in a pretty good place there. But we know that they're probing into the southwest of the UEE, around Elysium, around Idris, and that gives them access to the heart of the UEE. And so they could come through that way. We just don't know where they're going to be coming from. But yeah, that's my take on that. I don't think that the Vanduul are coming for Earth anytime soon. It would be a long, we know that it took them from 2681 to 2945 to go through Orion, Tiber, and Virgil to get to Vega. In order to get to Sol, they'd have to go through Elysium, Idris, Retor, and Croshaw. to get to Sol. It's a long, hard fight. Those are old UE systems, well established, well defended. But we'll see. I think we'll have dynamic events in Lear, in Elysium with the Vanduul, along with dynamic events, on the northwestern front in Oberon and Vega. Because if you look at those jump points, if you look at the map, it gives you a pretty good idea of where we're likely to see the Vanduul and what types of Vanduul forces we might see. If your org is hunting for big Vanduul trophies and big payouts from the UEE of Vanduul capital ships, you're probably not going to want to look for Vanduul in systems only connected by small jump points to Vanduul systems. You're going to want to go to some place like Elysium. You're going to want to go to Oberon. You're going to want to go to Vega. And wait for the Vanduul there. Those are going to be the systems where the dynamic events against the Vanduul on a large scale are going to occur. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Oh boy. That is intense.
Mm-hmm.
I got nothing,
Lord.
I've got nothing to add to that. It's just a lot of information.
Yeah. A lot of people just look at the star map and like, ooh, it's pretty and it won awards, and it's like it's full of really good information if you tie the star map into the lore.
Yeah.
And as Paul always says, the lore influences gameplay.
Yep.
And if you just read the lore, it doesn't give you the context that the star map does. And I think it's just like when we were talking about the items with the progress tracker. In order to make predictions or set expectations for when things release, when it comes to gameplay and what the game will look like in the future, especially when things are like dynamic events against the Vanduul are concerned, the lore and the star map are really where you get that information, where you can sort of make those predictions.
Yeah, makes me even more anxious to play Squadron 42.
Right? And we don't even know. Like the Squadron 42, we've only seen bits and pieces in Odin as well as the trailer in Vega.
Yeah.
We don't know, we don't know if Squadron 42 actually takes place in Vega. I think it does. I think
we only know of the
missions in Vega.
We only know of the stuff they put together, which is
Yep.
mostly episode 1 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So episode 2 and 3, which are, as far as ship-related stuff goes, Pegasus and Retribution. Not coming in
Cruiser, battle cruiser.
Yeah. Oh, so much stuff. So much really cool stuff. I think that's everything for this show. Right?
That is the My Scanner Anomaly. That is everything that we have on the docket for tonight.
All right. So as
we're about the technical issues.
I'll hopefully get. I'll almost definitely get fixed by week. So, thank you everyone for showing up. Those who showed up for live, those will be posted. Hopefully, I say this every time. Hopefully tomorrow, both on podcast places and YouTube. Technical difficulties willing. We had a subscription gift by Tree. We also had Black Intellect show up. Follow. Thank you both. You. I'm really rusty on these outros, but thank you again for everyone who's showing up. And that is going to be it for this week. So we'll see you all next week. And as I say, be kind. That's Paul's outro. And as always, be kind.
Have a good night.
Bye.